It was supposed to be just another summer afternoon in Evansville, Indiana. August 13th, 1998. The sun baked the cracked sidewalk out front of Lena Carter's modest two-bedroom home, and the rhythmic hum of cicadas filled the air like static. Inside, the TV played reruns of Wheel of Fortune, and the smell of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches lingered in the kitchen. Outside, 4-year-old Emily Carter, in her pink overalls and light-up sneakers, was chasing bubbles with her plastic wand, laughing as each one burst on her tiny fingers. Joseph Carter was late picking her up. Again, ever since their separation 6 months prior, Joseph and Lena had shared custody. Mondays and Thursdays were his. Lena had been keeping track with red dots on a calendar on the fridge, circling each missed pickup. Joseph was a good father, she'd always said, just not consistent. He worked odd hours at the mill, said he was tired all the time, said he forgot sometimes. At 3:45 p.m., Lena went out to check on Emily. The yard was empty. At first, she wasn't alarmed. Emily had a habit of hiding behind the tall bushes near the mailbox. Lena called out, once, then twice, then with more urgency. Nothing. She ran up and down the street, barefoot, shouting her daughter's name. No answer, just the sound of cicadas and a hollowing silence that cracked something open inside her chest. By 4:15 p.m., the police were there. A search began immediately. Neighbors poured out of their homes. Flashlights, dogs, flyers, chopper in the air. Someone said they saw a blue sedan speeding off earlier. Someone else said they saw nothing. One neighbor insisted Joseph had driven by at noon, looked real tense, but couldn't say for sure. By 6 p.m., Joseph was at the scene, red-faced and breathless. He claimed he just heard what happened from a coworker. He looked panicked, disoriented. Lena didn't want to believe it, but a whisper in her gut told her something was wrong. "Why didn't you come earlier?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I didn't know," he whispered. "God, Lena, I didn't know." The next morning, detectives found something. Joseph's Ford Taurus had been parked at a nearby strip mall overnight. A patrol officer ran the plates out of curiosity. Inside the trunk, beneath a tarp and next to a tire iron, was a small, blood-stained piece of clothing, a child's pink shirt with Emily stitched on the tag. The same shirt Emily had been wearing the day she disappeared. The town turned fast. Joseph was arrested that afternoon, his wrists cuffed behind his back as reporters swarmed the sidewalk. On the news that night, his mugshot was shown beside Emily's beaming school photo, the one where she was missing her 2 front teeth. Lena watched in horror, clutching a stuffed rabbit that still smelled like Emily's baby shampoo. "God help us," she whispered, not knowing who she was praying for anymore. Joseph maintained his innocence. From the very first interrogation, he told detectives the same thing. He didn't pick up Emily, didn't know she was missing until someone called him at work. He had no idea how the shirt got into his trunk. He hadn't used the car in 2 days. He even offered to take a polygraph. They gave him one. It came back inconclusive. The town didn't care. The DA didn't care. They wanted someone to blame. A father killing his daughter made headlines. Made sense in a twisted, brutal kind of way. The prosecution said Joseph was tired of parenting, that the strain of separation turned to rage, that maybe he never wanted a child to begin with. Lena sat on the witness stand 2 months later and broke down as she described the last morning she saw Emily. She cried when they showed the shirt. When they asked if Joseph had ever been violent, she hesitated, then said, "Not to her, but to me, yes. Once. Years ago." That pause sealed his fate. There was no body, no DNA linking Joseph to a crime scene, no clear motive, but there was a timeline, a bloody shirt, and a public ready to condemn. The jury deliberated for just 5 hours. Guilty of first-degree murder. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Joseph didn't cry when the verdict was read. He stared blankly ahead, lips pressed tight, fists clenched. But as the bailiff led him away, he turned to Lena and shouted, "Emily is alive. She's still out there. And you all let this happen." The courtroom erupted. Lena fainted. Back at home, Emily's room remained untouched. Her tiny shoes still sat by the door. Her drawings still taped to the fridge. The dollhouse Joseph had bought her for Christmas, hand-painted and filled with miniature furniture, sat in the corner, collecting dust. The town moved on, as towns do, but Joseph Carter didn't. In a concrete cell hundreds of miles away, he began writing letters. One every year on her birthday, one every Christmas, one every time he remembered the way she used to call him Daddy and squeeze his finger in her sleep. He never stopped calling her name in his prayers. He never stopped waiting for the day she might come home. The trial of State of Indiana versus Joseph Carter began in early April 1999, nearly 8 months after Emily vanished. By then, the town of Evansville had already made up its mind. The courthouse was packed on the first day. Journalists squeezed into wooden benches alongside neighbors and church members, whispering and trading looks as Joseph was led in wearing an ill-fitting navy suit and a blank stare. He looked thinner, paler, older than his 38 years. His hands trembled as he took his seat beside his court-appointed attorney. To the public, he was already a monster, a father who killed his own child, the devil hiding behind a gentle smile and Sunday cookouts. The prosecution leaned hard into that image. District Attorney Paul Whitman was seasoned, theatrical, and coldly effective. His opening statement was brief, chilling. This man, this father, was the last person scheduled to see Emily Carter alive. And now she's gone. No body, no goodbye, just a bloody shirt in his trunk. This wasn't a stranger. It wasn't an accident. This was murder. He let the word hang in the air like smoke. The defense struggled from the start. Joseph's attorney, Mark Bell, was competent but overwhelmed. With no budget for private investigators or forensic experts, Bell relied mostly on cross-examination and character witnesses. He argued that the case was circumstantial, built entirely on suspicion, with no physical evidence placing Joseph at the scene of a crime that may not have even occurred. "We don't even know that Emily is dead," Bell reminded the jury. "There's no body, no eyewitness, no murder weapon. All we have is a shirt and assumptions." But in the courtroom of public opinion, that shirt was everything. The prosecution brought in the forensics expert who tested the blood. Type O negative, Emily's blood type. There was no DNA available for confirmation due to the small sample size, but emotionally, it was more than enough. Lena's testimony was the gut punch they needed. She looked like a shell of herself when she took the stand. Hair unkempt, voice trembling. Her hands shook as she unfolded a crumpled tissue in her lap. She spoke about Joseph's unreliability as a father, how their relationship had crumbled under stress, how he would miss pickups, lose his temper. And then came the question that changed everything. Has the defendant ever been violent? Lena hesitated, looked down, then slowly, softly said, "Not with Emily, but he shoved me once, back when I told him I wanted a divorce." That pause, just a few seconds, was fatal. Whitman seized on it instantly. He painted Joseph as a man with a temper, a man who felt abandoned, emasculated, and out of control. The kind of man who'd snap if his child became one more thing slipping away from him. The defense objected repeatedly, but the damage had been done. The prosecution called neighbor witnesses. Some claimed to see Joseph's car parked near the house days before the disappearance. Others recalled arguments between him and Lena. One even claimed they heard Emily crying and someone yelling days before. The details were vague, but in the courtroom, they were enough to build a mood. A picture, one of guilt. Joseph took the stand in his own defense. It was risky. Bell advised against it, but Joseph insisted. He spoke softly, earnestly. His eyes scanned the jury, looking not for pity, but for belief. "I didn't hurt my daughter," he said. "I never would. I loved Emily. She was my world. The shirt, I don't know how it got there, but someone wanted me gone. Someone put it there." He paused, looking down at his hands. "You don't have to believe me, but I beg you, don't stop looking for her." His words were sincere. His voice cracked. A few people in the gallery even teared up, but it wasn't enough, because Lena, her grief, her trembling hands, her wavering voice, lingered louder in their minds. The jury deliberated for just under 6 hours. The verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence, life in prison without parole. When the verdict was read, Joseph closed his eyes. No tears, No outrage. Just silence. When the judge asked if he had any final words before sentencing, he turned toward Lena in the courtroom and said, "I hope one day you realize the truth. Emily's not gone. She's just not home yet." He was led away in shackles. Lena didn't cry. Not right away. She simply stood there, staring at the empty defense table, as if someone had just switched off the world around her. That night, the town of Evansville rested easier. They believed justice had been served. Emily's room remained untouched. Her pink backpack still hung on the closet doorknob. A framed photo of her, smiling next to Joseph, sat on her nightstand, collecting dust. Lena couldn't bring herself to throw anything away. She sat in the living room alone that night, a glass of wine trembling in her hand. She stared at the front door long after midnight, waiting for the sound of little feet running up the porch. But the door stayed silent, and the shadow that had fallen over her life only grew darker. The steel door slammed shut behind him with a sound that felt like forever. Wabash Valley Correctional Facility, Indiana's high-security prison, became Joseph Carter's world in the fall of 1999. He was processed, stripped of his name, and handed an identification number 732901. From that moment on, no one called him Joseph, just Carter or murderer. His first cell was 6 by 9 feet, a metal bed bolted to the wall, a toilet without a lid, a thin mattress with a cigarette burn in the corner. It smelled of bleach, sweat, and hopelessness. The guards didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. His face had been on TV for weeks. They knew who he was, the man who killed his daughter. Even if no one could find a body, they all believed the same thing. He did it, and he got what he deserved. But Joseph never stopped saying her name. In the mornings, he whispered it like a prayer. Emily. In the showers in the mess hall, lying on the cold mattress at night. Emily. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't madness. It was hope. Quiet, stubborn, and unbreakable. Every year, on August 13th, her birthday, he wrote her a letter. The first one was just a few lines. "Hi, baby girl. I hope you're safe, wherever you are. I miss you. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I love you. Daddy." He folded it carefully and placed it inside a small box where he kept other letters. To her, to Lena, to himself. He never sent them. He had no address to send them to. But he wrote anyway. It was all he had. Years passed. He took a job in the prison library, cleaned the floors, shelved books. The guards liked that he kept to himself, never caused trouble, never raised his voice. Some called him Ghost Dad, a nickname started by an inmate who'd seen him staring at a blank wall for hours, lips moving, eyes full of somewhere else. He never fought, never cried, but he never forgot. One winter, around 2007, another inmate, a lifer like him, asked him why he still believed Emily was alive. You think a kid just disappears for a decade and shows up smiling? The man had laughed. Joseph didn't answer. He just opened his palm, revealing a crumpled Polaroid photo. Emily at age 4, blowing bubbles, her cheeks full and eyes wide with joy. "Because I know my daughter," he said quietly. "And if she's out there, she's looking for me too." Meanwhile, the outside world changed without him. Lena remarried in 2003 to a man named Roy. Quiet, kind, unassuming. But something in her had died long ago. She never had more children. She stopped celebrating birthdays. The town whispered less now, but she still felt their eyes in the grocery store. She stopped going to church, stopped looking at her own reflection. Every now and then, someone would ask her, "Do you ever wonder if Joseph was telling the truth?" She'd freeze, then say, "There's no body, but there's a bloody shirt. What more do you need?" But at night, when Roy was asleep, she'd open Emily's old closet and sit there for hours. Rocking, silent, lost. Back in Wabash Valley, time blurred. Seasons came and went. Inmates died. Guards retired. New ones came in, less interested in old stories. Joseph's health declined slowly. His joints stiffened. He had high blood pressure, mild arrhythmia. His teeth yellowed. But he still walked the yard every morning at 6 a.m., as if waiting for something, someone, to appear on the horizon. And every August, he wrote another letter. "Emily, you be 20 today. I wonder what kind of music you like. I hope you dance. I hope you smile. He talked to the prison chaplain sometimes. Not about God, about grief. About forgiveness. About how the worst thing wasn't prison, but being forgotten. That's what scared him most. Not the cell. Not death. But the thought that Emily might forget his voice. In 2022, his heart grew weaker. He collapsed in a shower one morning and was transferred to the prison infirmary. A doctor told him he had congestive heart failure. You could have a year, maybe 2. Joseph nodded. He didn't panic. He just asked for a pencil and paper. That August, he wrote what would become his final letter. If you're alive, Emily, I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not even for a second. You are not a mistake. You are not forgotten. You are the reason I kept breathing. If I don't see you in this life, I'll find you in the next. In April 2023, Joseph Carter died quietly in his sleep in the infirmary wing of Wabash Valley. No family came to claim his body. No memorial was held. He was buried in a plain pine coffin in the prison cemetery, beneath a simple marker that read, Joseph Carter, 1961 to 2023. Father. Wronged. Waiting. His letters were boxed and stored with his personal belongings, left unclaimed. And so, the man who had been called a murderer, who died believing his daughter was still out there, was gone. But he was right. Emily Carter was alive. And 1 year later, in the spring of 2024, she would knock on a door that hadn't been opened in a long time. And the world would never be the same again. It was a quiet Sunday morning in May 2024 when Lena Carter heard the knock. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a half-empty coffee mug, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Roy had left for church an hour ago. She hadn't gone in years. Not since. The knock came again. 3 soft taps. Hesitant. Lena's stomach tightened. Nobody ever knocked on her door anymore. People called, or didn't bother. She lived on the edge of town now, in a 1-story house surrounded by overgrown lilacs and silence. Most days passed without a single visitor. She opened the door, and her world collapsed. Standing on the porch was a young woman, late 20s, maybe 30. African-American, slender, curly dark hair pulled into a ponytail. Her eyes, those eyes, were wide, glistening, almost frightened. She wore a denim jacket and held a folded piece of paper in her trembling hand. Can I help you? Lena asked, her voice sharp, defensive, habitual. The woman swallowed hard. My name is Emily. Lena froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Emily Carter, the woman said again. I think you're my mother. For a long moment, neither moved. Lena stared, breath caught in her chest, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She looked at the woman's face, that mouth, that chin, the tiny scar above her left eyebrow. Lena knew that scar. Emily had fallen off a swing at age 2. She clutched the doorframe, dizzy. This isn't funny, she said, but her voice cracked. This is some sick joke. Emily slowly handed her the paper. Lena unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a DNA test report issued by a private clinic in Columbus, Ohio. On the bottom line, bolded, probability of maternity, 99.99%. Lena Carter, biological mother. Lena's knees buckled. She sat down right there on the porch steps, hands over her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Her whole body shook. Ow, she whispered. Where have you been? You were dead. You were gone. Emily knelt in front of her. I wasn't dead, she said softly. I was stolen. They sat together for hours. On the porch, then at the kitchen table, then in the faded living room filled with dusty photos of a daughter that never grew up. Emily told her story. She remembered very little from the day it happened. Just bubbles. A car door. A strange woman with candy. Then, nothing familiar. Nothing safe. The woman who raised her had called herself Aunt Sandra, but made it clear early on, your real parents didn't want you. That lie shaped Emily's life. She grew up in Columbus under a different name, Rachel Monroe. No birth certificate. No school photos before age 5. She was homeschooled, kept inside most of the time. Sandra said it was for protection. The world out there doesn't want girls like you, she'd whisper. Sandra was strict, but not cruel. At least, not obviously. She never hit Emily. She fed her, clothed her, even told her stories at bedtime. But there were locks on every window. No playdates. No birthday parties. She wasn't allowed to watch TV shows with news. Any questions about her past were met with silence or guilt trips. Sometimes, Emily would sit by the living room window and watch the neighbor kids ride their bikes in circles, their laughter echoing through the closed glass. She'd place her hand against the pane and wonder what it would feel like to run free like that. To have scraped knees. To fall and be picked up by someone who didn't seem scared all the time. Sandra didn't yell. She didn't strike. But control came in quieter ways, through the way she locked the pantry at night or insisted on brushing Emily's hair even when she was 12. There were rules for everything. How many seconds to microwave dinner, what kind of books to read, nothing with too many ideas, and what to say when someone knocked on the door, don't answer. We're not home. There were no photographs of Emily as a baby. No baby book. No stories about when she lost her first tooth or said her first word. When she asked, Sandra would smile tightly and say, "Some memories are better left in the past." But the loneliest part wasn't the silence. It was the birthdays. Every August 13th, Sandra would bake a plain vanilla cake with no candles. No singing. No guests. Just the two of them at the kitchen table, eating in near silence. One year, when Emily turned 9, she asked if she could invite her neighbor, a girl named Marisol, to come over. Sandra's hand froze on the fork. "You don't need other people," she said. "You have me." That was the last time Emily asked. As she grew older, the questions multiplied, but the answers didn't. Who were her parents? Why didn't they want her? Why didn't she have baby pictures like other kids? Sandra's response never changed. "You're safe now." That's all that matters. And Emily wanted to believe it. She needed to believe it. Because if the alternative was that someone, somewhere, had let her go, it was easier to believe no one was waiting. But sometimes, late at night, she would stare at the ceiling and whisper into the dark. "Did someone name me Emily? Did anyone ever hold me when I cried? Is there someone out there who misses me?" She didn't know it yet. But miles away, in a prison cell with nothing but faith to hold on to, a man was asking the same thing. It wasn't until Sandra got sick, pancreatic cancer, late stage, that cracks began to show. In her final weeks, Sandra grew incoherent, talking about things Emily didn't understand. A woman named Lena. "She left me," Sandra would mumble. "Took everything. I took her back." Then, one night, Emily found a box tucked behind an old heater. Inside, baby photos, a pink shirt stained with something brown, and a yellowing letter addressed to Lena Carter. The letter was never sent, but the words haunted Emily. "You stole my heart and left me empty. So I took yours. You don't deserve her. I'll raise her better than you ever could." There was also a photo, Lena holding a smiling toddler. Emily recognized her own face. The world spun. After Sandra died in February 2024, Emily took the box and fled. She found a friend, a librarian named Dana, who helped her track down public records. That led to the DNA test, then the address, then the knock. Lena sat silently for a long time after Emily finished. She looked down at her hands, wrinkled, shaking, aging, and then at her daughter's face. Not a ghost, not a dream, flesh and blood. And yet, there was no joy in her eyes, only pain. "Your father," Lena finally whispered, voice raw. "He died last year, in prison, still saying you were alive, still writing you letters." Emily's lips parted. "He died?" Lena nodded. "He was innocent, Emily. He went to his grave thinking you were alive, but no one believed him. Not even me." The room filled with a silence, so thick it was hard to breathe. Emily stood up, walked to the fireplace mantel, where a single photo sat. Joseph, holding a toddler Emily at the beach, both smiling. She picked it up, stared at it as if seeing herself from a lost life. "He died thinking I was dead," she whispered, "and I spent my life thinking he was a monster." She turned back to Lena, tears finally welling up. "Can I see his letters?" Lena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She went to the back closet, Emily's old room, and pulled out a box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were stacks of envelopes, all addressed to Emily Carter, all unopened. Emily held the first one, her hands shaking, heart pounding. And for the first time in her life, she read her father's voice. "Hi, baby girl." She fell to her knees and sobbed. The name Sandra Myers hadn't been spoken in Lena Carter's home for nearly 3 decades. But now, it echoed through the quiet hallways like a curse that had never been lifted. They sat across from each other, mother and daughter, surrounded by open letters and fading photographs. Emily clutched her father's final letter to her chest, while Lena stared into a cup of cold coffee, her mind spiraling back to a time she had spent her whole life trying to bury. "Tell me about her," Emily finally said. "Who was she?" Lena took a long breath. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a worn, leather photo album she hadn't opened in over 20 years. She flipped to a page near the back. There they were, Lena and Sandra, 2 girls, no older than 17, arms around each other, standing in front of a rusted Chevy at the edge of town. Sandra had a wild grin, dark curls tucked into a red bandana, while Lena looked unsure, shy, like she didn't yet belong in her own body. "She was my first love," Lena admitted. "Back in high school. We kept it secret, of course. It was the 70s. You didn't tell people in Indiana you were in love with another girl." Emily said nothing, just listened. Sandra was bold, fearless. She always said she'd never let anyone make her feel ashamed. I admired that, but there was something off, controlling. If I didn't return her calls fast enough, she'd show up banging on my door. If I even looked at another friend too long, she'd accuse me of betraying her. Lena looked down at the photograph. I thought it was passion, but now I see it was something darker. They dated in secret for nearly 2 years before Lena met Joseph. It started innocently. He worked at the local gas station, offered to fix her bike for free. They talked. He made her laugh. He was kind, safe, and unlike Sandra, he didn't make her feel like love was something to be afraid of. When I told Sandra it was over, she lost it, Lena said quietly. Screamed at me in the school parking lot. Said I was a coward, a liar. She told me she'd never forgive me for choosing a man over her. A few weeks later, Sandra left town. Lena married Joseph the following year. Emily was born in '94, and they never heard from Sandra again. Until now, Emily sat in silence, absorbing every word. The woman who had raised her, the only mother she had known for most of her life, wasn't just a stranger. She was a storm that had never passed. She told me, "Who didn't want me?" Emily whispered. "That my dad was dangerous. That she rescued me." Lena's face contorted in grief. "She took my baby and framed my husband, just to punish me." The pain in the room was unbearable. And then Emily did something unexpected. She pulled a USB flash drive from her jacket pocket. I found this in Sandra's sewing drawer. I wasn't even sure what it was at first. But when I plugged it into Dana's laptop, she paused, voice trembling. I found videos, notes, a whole journal, typed. They opened the files together, and with each word, each recorded confession, the sickening truth unraveled. Sandra had documented everything. From the day she saw a toddler Emily playing in the front yard, to the planning, to the drive back to Columbus with a sleeping child in the back seat. Her words were full of venom and twisted justification. She chose him. She threw me away. I wanted her to feel what I felt, emptiness. I wanted her to see what it's like to love something and then lose it. At first, I just wanted to scare her. But then, Emily looked so much like her. I couldn't let her go. I loved her in a way Lena never loved me. He was supposed to break, rot in prison. But that man never stopped writing her, never stopped praying. That's what made me hate him the most. He still loved her, even from a cage. There was even video footage, Sandra, now in her 50s, staring into the camera with hollow eyes, whispering to an invisible Lena. She was mine longer than she was yours. She loved me. She called me Mama, and I was good to her. You can't take that from me. Emily shut the laptop with shaking hands. She wasn't just sick, she said. She was obsessed. With you. With controlling the pain. Lena nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. She didn't just kill your childhood. She killed your father. Slowly. Every year he sat in that cell. They contacted the authorities the next day. The evidence was overwhelming. Sandra's journals, her videos, Emily's testimony. The Attorney General's office reopened Joseph Carter's case. Within weeks, the state issued an official statement. Joseph Carter is posthumously exonerated of all charges related to the disappearance of his daughter, Emily Carter. The conviction was based on incomplete and manipulated evidence. He died in custody, wrongfully convicted. It made headlines. Some called it a tragic miscarriage of justice. Others, a cautionary tale of how bias and emotion can blind even the best intentions. But to Emily and Lena, it wasn't a story. It was a wound, one that would never fully heal. In the weeks that followed, Emily stayed in Lena's home. They took long walks, cooked in silence, cried in the middle of the night without explanation. Lena would sometimes wake to find Emily sitting in the living room reading her father's letters, whispering, "Hi, baby girl," over and over, like it was the only language she trusted. There were no quick fixes, no perfect reunions, but they had each other, and that was something. Emily asked to visit her father's grave. They drove together to the prison cemetery. She brought a bouquet of white daisies, his favorite, Lena had told her, and knelt before the small headstone. "I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner," she whispered. "But I know now. I know who you were, and I love you." Then she placed one of his letters at the base of the stone, and for the first time in her life, called him Daddy. The truth didn't set them free. Not exactly. It just changed the shape of the cage. When the exoneration of Joseph Carter made national headlines, it was framed like a victory. Wrongfully convicted father cleared after 25 years. But for Lena and Emily, it felt like the world was peeling open a scar that had never closed. People started coming out of the woodwork. Old neighbors, former co-workers, reporters, curious strangers who claimed they'd always had a bad feeling about the case or swore they remembered seeing someone else near the house that day. It was all useless now. Too late. Joseph was gone. But his name, at least, was finally clean. The state of Indiana held a formal press conference at the courthouse where Joseph had once been sentenced to life in prison. The same wood-paneled walls. The same solemn gavel. This time, Lena stood beside the Attorney General, not as a witness for the prosecution, but as the grieving widow of a man the system had destroyed. "We can't give Joseph Carter back his life," the AG said, "but we can acknowledge the wrong, and we can commit to doing better." They handed Lena a certificate of exoneration in a manila folder, as if it were a diploma, as if the paper could carry the weight of 25 years of injustice. In the weeks that followed, the media attention became suffocating. Emily was flooded with interview requests. Dateline, 2020, Netflix. Some wanted to make a docuseries. Others offered book deals. Everyone wanted to tell the story of the girl who came back from the dead. But Emily didn't feel like a miracle. She felt fractured. She politely declined every offer and moved into a quiet Airbnb 3 towns over. She told Lena she needed space, not distance, just space. To think, to breathe, to grieve in her own way. Because grief was everywhere now. It clung to her like humidity, slow, heavy, invisible, but always present. She cried at odd moments. In grocery stores, on walks. One time while brushing her teeth, when she caught a glimpse of her reflection and saw Joseph's eyes staring back. She read every letter he wrote to her. All 24 of them. One every birthday. One every Christmas. The words were soft and aching, like hands reaching through time. "Did you get taller this year, baby girl? Did you make any new friends? I miss the way you said goodnight, Daddy." Each one was written with the hope of a man who had no reason to keep hoping. But he did, and that's what broke her. Meanwhile, Lena was unraveling in her own quiet way. She stopped sleeping through the night. The nightmares came in waves, Emily crying behind a locked door, Joseph staring at her from a cell made of mirrors, Sandra laughing in the corner. In town, the reaction was mixed. Some offered sympathy, others judgment. People whispered when she walked past. She helped convict him. Didn't she testify against him? How could she not know? Even the kindest faces carried a hint of condemnation. And the truth was, Lena felt she deserved it. She kept replaying the moment on the witness stand when they asked her if Joseph had ever been violent. The pause. That single pause. Not with Emily. But he shoved me once. She'd said it to be honest, not to hurt him, not to damn him, but she had. She had helped the system bury him. She stopped going outside, canceled her library card, stopped cooking. Roy tried to help, but she pushed him away, said she needed to do this alone. She moved into the guest room, where Emily's letters were stacked beside a lamp that stayed on all night. One sleepless night in August, Lena opened the bottom drawer of her old cedar chest, one she hadn't touched in over a decade. It was filled with dust-covered mementos, photos from high school, dried flowers from her first wedding bouquet, a broken snow globe Emily had once shaken into a blizzard. And there, beneath a folded church bulletin and a pair of yellowing mittens, she found it. A letter, postmarked October 2003. The return address was Wabash Valley Correctional Facility. It was from Joseph. She remembered receiving it years ago, back when everything inside her still burned with confusion, shame, and betrayal. She hadn't been ready then. She had tossed in the drawer, thinking, what could he possibly say that I haven't already heard? But now, with Emily's voice still echoing in the house, with the weight of truth pressing down on her chest like a boulder, she needed to know. She peeled open the envelope with trembling hands. Dear Lena, I don't know if you'll read this. I'm writing anyway because I need to say something, maybe not for you, maybe for me. I think about you every day, not in anger, not even in regret, just memory. I remember the first time we brought Emily home. You were so tired, but you held her like she was made of stars. And I sat in that tiny nursery chair, watching the two of you, thinking I didn't deserve either of you, but promising God I'd try anyway. I know you testified against me. I know you hesitated, and I know what that hesitation cost. But I don't blame you, Lena. I never did. The world wanted someone to pay, and you were hurting too. If I could take away your pain, I would. If I could give you back peace, I would. I forgive you. I still love you. And I pray, every night, that one day you'll forgive yourself. Tell Emily, if you ever get the chance, that Daddy never stopped waiting. Lena pressed the letter to her heart and wept. She wept not only for Joseph, but for every moment she let silence build a wall between them. For every year, she buried her doubt beneath public opinion. For every time she said, what more do you need? Instead of what if he's right? She read the letter again and again until the ink blurred from her tears. Then she placed it beside Emily's unopened birthday cards. It belonged there, among the words written in hope, waiting to be heard. Sometimes she'd sit in the dark and whisper, I'm sorry, Joseph. I didn't know. I should have known. In July, Lena received a package in the mail. No return address. Just her name, handwritten in careful script. Inside was a small, spiral notebook. Sandra's journal. Emily had found it tucked in the back of an old bookcase, wedged behind a row of parenting books Sandra never read. She didn't want to keep it. She didn't want to burn it either. So she sent it to Lena, and Lena read every word. There were pages full of bitterness, rage, a disturbing obsession with control. But the most chilling entry came dated 2 weeks after the kidnapping. She calls me Mama now. I knew she would. Lena never deserved her. I do. I'll teach her to be good, not weak like her mother, and I will never let her know who she really is. Lena sobbed reading it, not just for Joseph, not just for Emily, but for herself, for the woman she used to be. Naive, self-protective, blind. She wrote a letter to Emily the next morning, not to ask for forgiveness, but to offer one thing she hadn't yet said out loud. I believe your father. I believe he was innocent from the very beginning. And I'm sorry for every moment I let the world believe otherwise. That fall, Lena and Emily returned together to Joseph's grave. They brought fresh daisies, a framed photo of the three of them, restored through AI from an old snapshot, and a small, polished stone that Emily had engraved herself. She placed it beside the headstone. It read, Daddy, I found my way back. I'll carry your name with pride. They stood there in silence for a long while, shoulder to shoulder, two women mourning the same man. One as a husband, one as a father, both victims of different kinds of theft. And when they finally walked away, Lena whispered, It wasn't justice. Not really. But it's a beginning. She began with Hi Daddy. That's how every one of his letters had started. Simple, honest, full of love. Now it was her turn. Emily sat at the old roll-top desk in Lena's guest room, the same desk Joseph had bought at a garage sale when she was 2, hoping one day she'd use it for homework and doodles and daydreams. The room smelled faintly of dust and lavender. She uncapped a blue pen, opened a fresh notebook she had bought the day before, and began writing to a ghost. "Hi, Daddy. I'm sorry it took me so long to write back. I've been reading your letters, every single one. You never missed a birthday. You never missed a Christmas. You never stopped believing in me. And I didn't even know you existed. The woman who raised me told me I was abandoned, that you were dangerous, that I was lucky to be with her. She lied to me every day of my life, and I believed her. I didn't know any better, but now I do. And I want you to know that I see you, Daddy. I see everything you tried to be, everything they stole from you." The first letter was 6 pages long. She cried through most of it, her tears soaking into the paper until the ink blurred. But she didn't stop. She wrote every night. By the end of the first week, she had written 4 more. Some were filled with pain, memories she now questioned, gaps in her life she couldn't explain. Others were full of longing, imagining what it would have been like if he had raised her. Birthday cakes, bedtime stories, walking her to school, scolding her gently when she didn't do her chores. But the most powerful ones were full of forgiveness. "I forgive you for not being there, even though I know it was never your fault. I forgive myself for not knowing you sooner, even though I was just a child. And I forgive the world for turning its back on you, even though it still hurts." Each letter she folded carefully and placed in a shoebox she'd labeled to him. She kept the box next to her bed, like a quiet promise. Then, one day in late November, she got an idea. She contacted Wabash Valley Correctional Facility, the prison where her father had spent 24 years of his life, and asked if they still had any of his belongings. To her surprise, they did. A small storage box had been left behind. A few books, a pair of reading glasses, a Bible with highlighted pages, and something that made her stop breathing. A cassette tape. It had her name scribbled on the label in shaky handwriting. For Emily, just in case. She didn't own a cassette player, but Lena did. An old one, buried in the attic with her 1980s mixtapes. They set it up together that night. Lena stayed in the kitchen, pretending to clean, pretending not to listen. Emily hit play. There was a long pause. Static. Then his voice. "Hey, baby girl. It's Daddy. I don't know if you'll ever hear this. I don't even know if you're alive. But if you are, if you ever find this, I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment. I wanted to be there for your first bike ride, your school plays, the nights you cried, the days you laughed. I wanted to know what your favorite color is, your favorite song, who your best friend is. I wanted to know the sound of your grown-up voice." Emily covered her mouth, shaking. "They told me I killed you, but I knew they were wrong. I knew you were out there. I didn't have proof. I just had faith. You gave me that, Em, even when I didn't have anything else. So if you hear this, please know you were never forgotten. You were never unloved. You're the best part of me. Always have been. Always will be. And if I'm not around anymore, it's okay. Because I got to be your dad. Even if it was just for a while. Even if it was just in letters. That was enough. Okay, baby girl. That's all for now. I love you." Click. Emily didn't move for a long time. Then she curled up on the couch, held the cassette to her chest, and let every wall inside her finally fall. A few days later, she made another trip to his grave. This time, she brought the shoebox full of letters. She dug a small hole next to his headstone, gentle, careful, and buried the box beneath a fresh patch of soil. Then she lit a candle, knelt down, and whispered, "Now you can read mine too." She stayed for hours, humming softly to herself, reading from his Bible, turning pages he once touched. And when she stood to leave, she smiled for the first time in a long time. Not the smile of someone who had healed, but the smile of someone who had begun. That winter, she started something new, a foundation in Joseph Carter's name, focused on helping children of wrongfully convicted parents find support, stability, and answers. She called it Letters to a Ghost. It began as a small community project. Then it grew. Journalists who once chased her for headlines now wanted to share her mission. She agreed, this time on her terms. She didn't tell the whole story. Just enough. Enough to make people think. Enough to make them care. Enough to remind the world that sometimes The worst part of injustice isn't the crime. It's the silence that follows. And every August 13th, on her birthday, Emily returns to the prison cemetery. She brings 2 daisies, one for the man they tried to erase, and one for the little girl who never stopped being loved. They called it justice. The courts, the press, the state. But for Emily Carter, it never felt like that. Justice doesn't come with a certificate. It doesn't come with a press conference or a polished apology. Justice, real justice, would have meant her father never spent a single night in a cell. Would have meant she never had to grow up calling a stranger mama. Would have meant Joseph Carter died free, with his daughter in his arms. But that didn't happen. And so, what came after wasn't justice. It was acknowledgement. It was grief. It was too late. In early 2025, nearly a year after her return, the Indiana Court of Appeals finalized the exoneration of Joseph Carter with full posthumous honors. He was formally removed from the registry of convicted felons, and the state issued an apology letter to his surviving family, Emily and Lena. They also approved a wrongful conviction compensation package, $1.2 million, meant to represent 24 years of wrongful imprisonment. The money didn't mean much to Emily. She donated most of it to expand the foundation she'd started in her father's name. She used the rest to fund scholarships for children with incarcerated parents, because she knew better than anyone what it meant to grow up with silence where a father's voice should have been. The state also offered to exhume Joseph's remains and relocate him from the prison cemetery to a private plot. Emily said yes. And so, one morning in March 2025, under a soft gray sky, a group of volunteers, lawyers, and 2 women in black coats stood by a fresh grave in a quiet corner of Riverside Memorial Park. A new headstone had been prepared, carved with care and conviction. Joseph Carter, 1961 to 2023. A father, a victim, a man who never stopped believing. Lena stood beside her daughter, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Emily reached over and took her hand. It was the first time they visited him, not behind bars, not behind glass, not behind years of doubt. Just a man, finally laid to rest, finally seen. They stayed long after the others had left. The volunteers drifted away. The lawyers offered quiet nods and handshakes. The undertaker packed up the last folding chair. And soon, the graveyard returned to its familiar hush, just wind, the distant hum of traffic, and birdsong filtering through tall sycamores. But Emily and Lena remained. They stood side by side before the new headstone, a polished slab of granite that finally bore Joseph's name with dignity. Not a number, not a prison ID, not a silent plot behind chain-link fences, but a marker of a man loved and remembered. Then came the soft crunch of gravel behind them. A man approached, gray beard, slow gait, a faded army jacket clinging to his bony frame. He carried something under his arm, a thick, leather-bound Bible worn from years of use. Emily turned to him, cautious. "You don't know me," the man said, voice weathered but kind. "Name's Gerald Mason. I shared a cell with your father back in 2005. Lena stiffened. Gerald raised a hand. "He talked about you both. Every night. Never blamed you. Said you were the best parts of him." Emily's eyes welled. I wanted you to know," he continued, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "He wrote this after your 8th birthday. Asked me to keep it in case anything happened to him. I never had the heart to send it." Emily took the paper with shaking fingers. Inside was a single page, torn from a notebook. Joseph's handwriting slanted and uneven, but unmistakably his. "Hi, baby girl. 8 years old today. I wonder if you lost a tooth. If you still like peanut butter sandwiches. I dreamed of you last night. You were laughing in a garden. I couldn't hear your voice, but I knew you were safe." She clutched it to her chest, sobbing. Gerald placed his Bible gently on the headstone and whispered, "Rest easy, brother. She found you." He turned to leave, but paused. "He used to trace your name on the wall with his finger every night before bed," he said, like a prayer, over and over. When he disappeared into the trees, Emily sat down in the grass, legs folded beneath her. She began to hum. It was a lullaby she didn't quite remember, but had once heard in pieces, hummed by Sandra at bedtime, warped and broken. But now, in this place, it made sense. The melody was fuller, whole. Lena knelt beside her, resting her hand on her daughter's shoulder. I never got to say goodbye, Emily whispered. You just did, Lena replied. And as the wind moved through the cemetery, it carried the sound of two women breathing, for the first time in years, freely. The story continued to ripple outward. True Crime Podcast dissected every detail. TV hosts debated how the system got it so wrong. Law schools studied the case as a cautionary tale. But none of them knew what it felt like to sit in Joseph Carter's cell, to run a finger along the etching he had carved into the wall above his bunk. Emily, I believe in you. Only Emily knew that kind of love, that kind of loneliness, that kind of loss. Lena began speaking publicly that spring, not to tell her side, but to admit where she had failed. She stood at community forums, in churches, in courtrooms, and said what others were too proud to say. I helped send an innocent man to prison because I didn't listen to my heart, because I was scared, because I let the world tell me what was true instead of trusting what I knew. Her voice was quiet, but it shook people awake. And though some still whispered behind her back, others came to her after the talks with tears in their eyes. Thank you, they said. I've been silent too. I didn't believe my brother. I cut off my son. The truth had opened a door, and Lena finally walked through it. One night, in June, Emily sat on the porch with her journal. Fireflies blinked in the yard, and the wind smelled like rain. She wrote one last letter to her father. Not for the shoebox, not for the grave, just for her. Hi, Daddy. I used to think the saddest part of all this was that I didn't get to know you. But now I realize I did. Through your letters, your prayers, your stubborn hope. I know your heart. I know the way you loved me without ever needing anything in return. That kind of love doesn't die. And I promise you, Daddy, I will carry it forward. I'll fight for the others like you. I'll love like you did. I'll write letters to children who feel alone and forgotten. And I'll tell them about the man who never stopped writing to me. Thank you for believing in me, even when the world didn't. Love, your baby girl. The next morning, she drove to the cemetery alone. She brought a single daisy and her favorite photo, Joseph holding her as a baby, sun on their faces, her tiny arms around his neck. She knelt, placed the daisy gently on the grave, and whispered, I found you, Daddy, and I found myself. She didn't cry this time, because grief had given way to grace. Today, the Letters to a Ghost Foundation has chapters in 5 states. It offers counseling, reunification support, legal advocacy, and, most importantly, a voice for children like Emily. Every August 13th, they hold a candlelight vigil for the wrongfully convicted. Families read aloud letters written to loved ones behind bars or beneath the earth. No cameras, no media, just truth. At the center of it all is Emily Carter. Not a victim, not a survivor, but a daughter. One who loved a father she never got to meet. Until she did. And in that moment, even if only in ink and memory, it was enough. At the end of the vigil that year, long after most of the candles had flickered out, Emily stood beneath a tree stringed with paper lanterns, thumbing through the last of the handwritten letters left at the tribute table. A small hand tugged at her coat. She turned. A girl, no older than 10, stood there, clutching a crumpled sheet of lined paper and a purple gel pen. Her eyes were wide, guarded, but filled with something Emily recognized instantly. Confusion wrapped in grief. Are you the lady who writes letters to ghosts? The girl asked. Emily smiled softly. Something like that. The girl hesitated. My name's Tori. My dad's in prison. Everyone says he did something bad, but I don't know. He used to read me bedtime stories. Emily knelt so they were eye level. Did you write him a letter? Tori nodded, holding out the paper. I tried, but it doesn't sound right. Emily unfolded it. The words were jagged, some crossed out. It read, Dear Daddy, I miss you, but I'm mad. I don't know if I should love you or forget you. Mama cries a lot. People don't talk to me at school. I don't know what's true anymore, but I still sleep with the pillow you gave me. Love, Tori. Emily blinked back tears. This is perfect, she whispered. But it's messy, Tori frowned. Messy means it's real, Emily replied. You wrote what your heart feels. That's brave. Tori looked down. Do you think He'll still love me, even if I don't know if I believe him. Emily touched the girl's hand. I know he does, because my father loved me even when I didn't know he existed. And when I finally found him, all he cared about was that I came back. Tori bit her lip. Do you think I'll get to see him again? I think you'll get to be heard, Emily said. And sometimes that's the first step. She handed Tori a fresh notebook from her tote bag. It was small, spiral-bound, with a blue cover and a sticker of a daisy on the front. Write to him, Emily said, as much as you want. Even if you never send them, those letters will still matter. They'll carry your love, even through silence. Tori hugged her without warning. And for a moment, Emily closed her eyes and let the warmth settle in. She wasn't just a daughter anymore. She was a bridge for those still waiting, still wondering, still whispering, Daddy, are you out there? And in that quiet summer night, beneath paper lanterns and tear-stained letters, she understood something sacred. Her story didn't end with finding her father. It had only just begun.